Hey guys, welcome to the 6th episode of Into the Rift. Today we have me hosting instead of the beautiful Thomas. However, today he's joining us as a panelist, which I'm sure everyone's pretty happy about because of his opinions that people like to hear. Anyway, for the full panelists for this week, we've got Stephen Nguyen. I'm sorry if I didn't say your second name properly again. Thomas Watts, Camille Nye, and Chase Wassenaar. Okay, so basically what we're going to be talking about is the quarterfinals that's been going on this week, and we're going to have a bit of a discussion about what we think is going to happen in the semi-finals next week. If it is next week, I'm not very good with dates. Okay, so we'll go straight into the first game of Samsung White versus TSM. It was pretty one-sided, to say the least, although I think everyone kind of expected that. Is there anything that... Is there any good points you would bring about what from TSM did in those games? Like, do you think they did anything impressive, or they showed that they had the potential to be on the same level as Samsung White?
In response to your second question, no, this was a painful mismatch from the beginning, and the 4 games just pretty much confirm that. But something that TSM can pull out of it is the fact that they were able to, for lack of a better term, out-rotate Samsung White in that 4th game. That back door was close to working, but Amazing had a very questionable set of decisions, quite honestly. But the first 2 games, it was, oh, TSM's on the Rift. Blink. Oh, TSM's not on the Rift anymore because they're dead. Game 3, Samsung White did what Samsung White has done in Korea for at least the past 3 seasons. Oh, we're up on you. We're going to try and style you. And TSM was good enough to block being styled. Sure, if you're a fan of moral victories, which I am not, that's great and all. But no, this game was a mismatch, and you're really splitting hairs about things that you saw that TSM can take and move forward with, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's unfair to say, obviously the 3rd game, White was not trying their hardest. The picks and bans were weird. Picking Kassadin for the mid lane is just something that doesn't happen nowadays. They were clearly not going all out. But at the same time, you still have to be a good enough team to take advantage of those mistakes. It's not like White purposely threw the game. Wild Turtle was able to have a strong game on Lucian, I should say, and Bjergsen was able to do enough on Yasuo to take the victory from them. Sure, they're not going to win in a straight-up game. Every time they had a straight-up game, they were going to lose. But we already knew that going into this series. This is Samsung White. You have arguably the best jungler in the world in Dade, and you do have what is clearly the best support in the world in Mata, who just played out of his mind in that series. I mean, TSM did exactly what they could have hoped for. Except for, I guess they played scared in the first 2 games, and we kind of knew they were going to do that because that's what they always do. But once they finally settled in, they did what they had to do to take the game in Game 3, and they did enough interesting stuff in Game 4 that maybe you can make an argument that's something they can build on. And if you're a TSM fan, that's what you have to hang your hat on right now.
I think that the most interesting thing is that a lot of people say that TSM did a lot better in the 4th game than the 3rd game, which they actually won, because most people believe that Samsung White weren't really trying in that game with the pick ban phase and everything. But yeah, in the 4th game, TSM actually managed to out-rotate Samsung White quite well. Is there anyone in the 4th game you would put it down to being able to almost come up to Samsung White's level?
Individually,
Any particular players, yeah.
Still kind of it's not a fair comparison. They're not going to be on the same level. The hopes were obviously in Bjergsen, but again, he's going to be matched against Pawn, so, he can be the best in the West, and there's Pawn. So a bit different level, I think, still. So no, I don't think individually they matched well. In Game 3, they had some nice plays, but there was a really weird attempt to style on TSM, which I'm glad didn't work, because if it worked, it wouldn't look pretty. Yeah, that would be embarrassing. Just for some people, it would even be just distasteful, let's say. Yeah, in Game 4, they had some nice ideas, but I don't think there was necessarily some outplays on an individual level. It was rather decision-making and shot calling from supposedly Bjergsen. So I'm really impressed. If it's really Bjergsen calling all those rotations, all those moves around the map, that's awesome, because being the star player of a team, being the guy that everyone relies on, and being the damage dealer as well, because you can be like Oriana or something, and you don't have to make all those quick decisions in team fights, or not to the level of Zed or Arya or all those assassins. So that's really impressive, and I think TSM and Bjergsen, if Bjergsen gets to his like top level, they are gonna be awesome. But they are still not gonna be Korean, and it's a really long shot if they want to go, let's say, next Worlds and compete, with some kind of a chance.
Speaking of individual players and Koreans, we can talk about an interesting Lustboy stat. He actually had the highest kill participation in the whole of the quarterfinals with 86%. When we're talking about TSM players not being Koreans, do you think that Lustboy is someone that totally outclasses the rest of his team?
I don't really think he outclasses the rest of his team, but he is definitely there with the rest of his team most of the time. I mean, a lot of times you might see one or two members of TSM off on their own trying to push out the wave, getting some farm, but Lustboy is always kind of there communicating with the team. He's always making sure he's got his team's back. And I think that's particularly why he gets a lot of his assists for his team, you know?
Thomas, what do you think about Lustboy?
Well, I think Lustboy it's obviously he's an upgrade over Glebe.
Yep. And
I think he's turned into a galvanizing force. He's really powered up Wild Turtle, but in the matchup between Imp Mata, Turtle, Lustboy, I mean, okay, he obviously TSM lost, but even in that individual matchup, Lustboy can only push Turtle so far. I don't think it's a case of TSM not working hard enough. I just think that they're going to have to continue to improve, and if they continue to improve, I actually kind of disagree. I think they could compete with a Korean team, but they're just not there yet. And I don't know specifically. I don't know enough about the inner workings of that team to say that they need to tweak some little thing here or there. I think Lustboy's experience from the OGN has been invaluable, combined with Loco Doco, teaching that team practice habits. You know, I've given this quote to Dave Troop, a guy that works for Paravine before, and it's something from Alabama Crimson Tide head football coach Nick Saban. It's the statement that you don't practice to get it right. You practice so much that you can't get it wrong. If you continue to build on that's you know, it almost explains itself. If you practice enough to where you can't get it wrong, then it will make you a better player. So I think that's a big thing that Lustboy has brought to the team, and you can see it as the team has gotten noticeably better since he's gotten in there.
Yeah, of course.
That makes a lot of
does anyone else have anything to say on that?
Oh, I was just going to say that makes a lot of sense, because if you practice so much that you can't get around, that means you get so good at this one champion. That's why you hear it pretty often that comfort picks are sometimes better than the most optimized pick. And that's why you can even see Pawn first picking Yasuo pretty often. Just because he's so comfortable at that champion, he's just so confident because he gets it right almost all the time. And you can almost say the same thing for Dade's Yasuo. Any pro known for their best champion, they've played that champion so many times in solo queue, so many times in scrims, they just don't get it wrong. And maybe they'll mess up once, once in a blue moon, but they just got it done.
I mean, Pawn's
speaking of
confidence.
players, Continue.
I was just going to say, Pawn's confidence was so easily seen by just looking at the pick and ban phase. In all 4 games, he blind picked his mid laner, even when he had the option to wait and see what Bjergsen was doing. And given that Bjergsen's kind of seen as the heart of that TSM team, I don't know if it was just a little bit of disrespect thrown that way or just a confidence in what he's able to do. But I think that's one of the things that White, when they are just able to push through and they have that confidence, there's a reason that they closed out their victories faster than any other team on the Rift. They just do this great job of going ham, and I guess what I would say is I think at the end, Lustboy's experience has definitely helped this team as far as, figuring out some of these rotations, figuring out how to keep calm when things don't go their way. I think that influence was you could see in Game 4 if you watched Les Boy's face, you could see him on the kind of take a little bit more of a lead there. Not, it's obviously Bjergsen's the main shot caller there, but I think that influence helps when you have someone who's been there before against this team and kind of understands it. And if any team has the money and the infrastructure in North America to practice that kind of way and work that team to a point where they could compete with some Koreans, it would be TSM. So I'm curious to see where they go from here for sure.
Speaking of TSM being able to compete against Koreans, some people would think that Amazing was holding them back quite strongly. I was going to say before when Stephen was making the point about players getting their best champions, not really making mistakes with them and stuff, we see Amazing get Lee Sin. We see the things that he does with his best champion. It's but then we've got this problem where for TSM to change out their jungler, then they'd have to get a North American jungler in because of the region requirements. Do you think that maybe Amazing's performance at Worlds this year could be improved upon? Like, he has been playing around this level, like even in North America, even when TSM are winning games, he's not really playing Amazing. He's always the person that's making the mistakes in the team. Do you think that he had a big impact on TSM's games this Worlds?
Yeah, I wouldn't say maybe the most positive effect on the team, but I think that's not necessarily fair to judge Amazing on the level of, let's say, Insects or all those also players, because when he came to TSM, he brought this huge hype about him, and that kind of screwed with him a bit, because he had a good start, and then it went downhill. I don't think he's necessarily a bad jungler. I think he does the job well. He has some good games, he has some bad games. But looking through the prism of this huge Amazing is the best jungler, and he has to carry, and he has the potential to carry, people just downplay if he's just playing average, people go straight away, no, he's not average, he's bad. So I don't think it's so fair to call him a bad player, and I think he probably will improve. And I definitely don't feel he can be the carry of the team as some of the, like Dade, Insect, or those kind of players, or Meteos in some games. He's not going to be this kind of a player, but he's still good enough to be a efficient jungler and a rather role player than a carry.
How does everyone else feel about Amazing? Do you kind of agree with what Camille said?
I could see... I'm going to get a lot of hate for this, but I kind of feel like Amazing plays a similar style to Bengi, in that he wants to get his lanes going, and there's nothing wrong with that. It just means that
if it works.
Yeah, obviously it worked. SK Telecom won a world championship doing it, and then they went undefeated in Champions Winter doing the exact same doggone thing. But even more than that, there's nothing wrong with it, and if it works for TSM, think about where TSM is strongest. TSM makes hay with power laners in Dyrus and particularly Bjergsen. And obviously now that Lustboy and Wild Turtle have kind of ironed out some of the chemistry issues, them too, TSM wants to power through you in the lane and then take a couple of fights and snowball. That's pretty much what TSM wants to do. Yes, there's some variations here and there, but if that's the blueprint for TSM, that's the very basic level. What you need in that case is a jungler that can prop that up a little bit, and Amazing fulfills that role. Now, do I think that he probably needs a little bit of work on his champion pool? Yeah, I do, I'll be honest. But what junglers are great right now? Kha'Zix, Lee Sin, and then Rengar. Well, I haven't seen a Rengar in the West that I like, and he's probably not going to get Lee Sin very often. So it's kind of like expand your champion pool. That could be a criticism of almost every Western jungler and some Eastern junglers. So I think a lot of the hate he's getting is that visceral need for fans to point fingers at a specific mistake that a specific person did consistently and lost the game. No, TSM ran into a buzzsaw. That's what happened in the quarterfinals.
Okay, so I think we've pretty much decided that the TSM versus Samsung White Finals It was Samsung White's games. Moving on to the next game of Cloud9 versus Samsung Blue. A bit more of a hope for the West. We actually thought that, well, it was predicted mainly by a lot of people that Cloud9 would take at least one game off Samsung Blue, unlike TSM for Samsung White. The first thing that I want to talk about is Wild Turtle and Lustboy against Samsung Blue's bot lane, because in the first game going into
elimination, right?
That's what I meant.
I'm helping you out. Just here to help.
It's North America. They're all the same team, okay? Anyway. Sneaky and Lemonation. Yeah, Sneaky and Lemonation seem to be doing really, really well against Samsung Blue's bot lane for the first start of the game. Some could say that they were actually manhandling Samsung Blue's bot lane at first. What do you guys think about the level of Sneaky and Lemonation's bot lane compared to Death's?
Well, I'll say this. I feel good about calling them a sneaky good bot lane last week, despite the horrible pundits in that sentence. I really love the way Sneaky played this series. I thought he did a great job on pretty much every champion he was handed. I'd say his Lucian is particularly good right now. Of course, Lucian's kind of the meta pick, so he looks good on most people right now. But Sneaky and Lemonation, the criticism's always been they're great at shot calls. They're great at organizing organizing team fights and doing, being where they need to be. But the laning phase has always been a little bit weaker for them. And I definitely think at least in that one area, they really stepped up in this series. It's the best laning that I've seen from that duo in a long time. Now, was that enough to win the series or even win lane against Deft and Hart every time? I mean, no. You're not going to win lane against Deft and Hart 4 times in a row. I don't care what bot lane you are. Maybe Mata with White, you can make a case they can win 4 times in a row, but probably not. Deft is really, really good. He gets his Twitch, and he's really, really good. But I still think even in games where Cloud9's bot lane wasn't able to carry them through, they never looked bad. It was always a back and forth. Yeah. They were always able to at least hang in there. And when you can do that, then you give chances for other people on your team to really step up and help you guys out. Unfortunately, the rest of Samsung Blue is Dade, Acorn, and Spirit. So just matching even is not going to be enough to do much in a series.
Mm-hmm.
I thought a lot of the strength that Sneaky and Lemonation showed, and just to give another statistic, Sneaky actually had the highest damage share of anybody on his team in the quarterfinals with 34% damage done. But I think Blue made a big mistake in picks and bans trying to take Janna away from Lemonation. In the group stage, Lemonation played Janna 4 times. Obviously, since there were 7 games, that's over half. So, big pick for Lemon. So what you saw Blue do is early pick Thresh. Thresh into Janna is a rough matchup in lane. It ended up not working out because Sneaky's Lucian is really, really strong. So I think it was a credit to Sneaky and Lemon for being able to take advantage of that kind of awkwardness that they introduced into Blue's champion select. I thought that was really awesome. I will say I don't rate Deft and Hart as laners very highly. Just my own personal opinion. I think they lose lane a lot. But they make up for it because in terms of lane swap, pure lane swap mechanics, Blue's up here, everyone else is right here. What they do, they don't mess up lane swaps, and it lets them play a Twitch that they're not going to get him behind in an awful matchup. They're going to give him a bunch of farm, and when team fights start breaking out in that mid game, which is traditionally where Samsung Blue has really delivered some of their most devastating hits, you have this Twitch that hasn't been held down by a bad lane, that's positioned very well, because that's what Def does so well, is his positioning, his understanding of what he needs to do, and you just kind of start that Samsung Blue engine on the way to victory. But no, Sneaky and Lemon as a duo, they played extraordinarily well.
I think they've gotten a lot better since they've went to Korea, especially with all the streaming they've done. And I mean, they had their group stage this second week of Worlds, so we didn't see them for the longest time compared to when we saw the TSM that showed up in groups. Not to also to talk about Deft and Hart, they kind of remind me of Captain Jack in the old days, like Captain Jack and Lustboy, because they always lost lane. Well, although when they lost lane, it was more like Captain Jack and Lustboy would always get ganked and that one of them would die. It was considered a miracle if Captain Jack only died once. But they were able to play so well in the mid and late game that it almost was nullified. So as long as you keep the damage minimal from the bot lane, they should be fine. But yeah, they just do it way better than Captain Jack and Lustboy did. So I think that's why Deft and Heart is so good. But yeah, in terms of 2v2s, I don't think they're that amazing.
Camille, is there anything that you want to add to the other three?
Yeah, the bottom line definitely was especially sneaky, because Lemon Nation had some awesome plays, but it also had some misses that cost some of the trades, not only in lane, but rather later on around Dragons. He missed a couple things that he shouldn't have. But I think Sneaky may as well be from this point on the main star of Cloud9, because he was just amazing. All those mobile and bursty champions. Corki was also pretty good. Not so sure about Graves, to be honest, because this pick is always a bit dodgy at best. But yeah, on both Corki and Lucian, which are in the meta right now, and they're amazing both, he's superb at least. I also think that the game one was it was pretty obvious that Cloud9 prepared the game one to an amazing level. They had everything covered, and they just went from one place to another. That was awesome. But I don't think they expected this change from Samsung Blue, that just turning up the level, changing peaks almost completely, and just being better overall. I don't think Cloud9 wanted to have the games prolonged, and I think Cloud9 overall wanted just as quickly as possible gain the advantage over Blue, as most teams want to, but that was the only way to do it. And then, apart from game one, they had problems. Obviously, the bottom lane did fine, but the jungle and the solo laners weren't that great at the early game. They were, though, awesome at controlling vision, and they were keeping up. If you're keeping up with vision with Samsung Blue, that's something. Not many teams can do that, and I think Cloud9 did a pretty good job. And that's why they won the game the first game, because they dewarded, just hit somewhere. Yeah. No, they won the first. Cloud9. Was it the first?
Yeah,
that was
they
the first.
They won the first.
Yeah, Cloud9 won the first game.
Confusing me, Amber. Confusing me.
I'm not confusing you. This match history thing, it says game 3, I click on the match history and it's like Cloud9 win. But apparently it's lying
Yeah,
to me.
I think they prepared the first game perfectly, but they didn't expect Blue to go on a different, with a different champion style, different comp, and that was just a bit dodgy from game 2 on. And I think that it's fine. They hang on. They had some good decisions with the split pushing. High pretty much playing the Darian style. Just do your thing. Just keep 5 people or 4 or 5 people away from your team. That's fine, but that's not gonna win you the game. They have to do something else. You can't gimmick your way through a best of 5, and that's a bit lacking for me.
Speaking of High, I want to talk a little bit about his game 4 Talon pick, because Talon has been a champion we've seen a few times in World so far, and it has been far from successful, we can pretty much say. Why do you think that Cloud9 decided on a Talon pick, apart from the obvious mid lane thing? Like, did he think that maybe he could get ahead of Dade in lane or something maybe with this pick? Like, because obviously he can't really match up to him later on in the same way that Lemon Nation and his AD carry, whoever it's called, can't match up to Deft.
I still remember looking at High's face when he locked it in, and he literally looked to the side and shrugged, just like, oh, let's go with it. And given the way that his Talon games had gone previously beforehand, I totally understand why he'd have trepidation there. I mean, I guess the logic behind it is he's been prioritizing Zed first and foremost in every game this series. There's no doubt about that. He really loves those melee assassins, and you know, it's funny enough because I think his Syndra was probably the best thing that he's played throughout this Worlds, but for whatever reason, they just love those melee assassins, and he went for it every chance he could, but they'd already banned out Zed, so I guess the next default guy is Talon, who's a slightly worse version of Zed. Problem with that is, if you're a slightly worse version of Zed, and you weren't winning when you had Zed earlier, that's not good. That's not going to help you in the long run. And I think, honestly, it's hard to really say whether his Talon was the reason that he lost that lane. I think anyone going up against Dade's Yasuo is going to lose that lane. I think it's utterly ridiculous that Yasuo was even an option, given that not only could they have banned it, but they could have first picked it. There is no reason that should have been a possibility. So was that the Talon's fault? No, the fault was letting Yasuo be a problem in the first place. But, Talon certainly didn't help, I don't think, in the long run.
Well, I just had to look up the champion select phase for this game, and it was Cloud9 banned Thresh, Zed, Ryze. Samsung Blue banned Zillion, Alistar, Lucian. And then Cloud9 first picked Lee Sin, and then you had Yasuo, and you had Blue took Yasuo for Dade second rotation. I kind of give credit to Samsung Blue on this one. Without Zed, you have a big question mark in highest champion pool. Yasuo is kind of there, but they didn't feel it was first pick worthy. For me, I think it was, just because I truly believe that Dade's Yasuo, probably along with Going's Ryze, are the two champion player combinations that you shouldn't allow to happen. Like, if either of those things hit the rift, there is a fundamental flaw in your ban phase. Or your picks too, but really in your bans, because that's the foundation. But it happened, and then, okay, you've got to stop this guy that is a devastating monster. You don't have the champion in Zed that might have a chance to do it. Where are you going to go? Talon, maybe, because Talon has been all the rage in Korean solo queue, which Hai played a ton of games in. For an idea, I can see it, just as something to do. But I didn't agree with it. But I felt like the way Blue handled all of that set up Hai to force in that Talon pick, which is a really, really brilliant, slight, just a small thing during Champion Select that gave Blue that oomph they needed to win the game.
That makes sense to me, especially because we know that Hai likes to split push. He usually does it on Zed, right? But if they take the Yasuo away from him, then someone's going to have to deal with Dade's split push on Yasuo. And Syndra stopping the split push, at that point, Yasuo is so strong in the 1v1, it's really hard to counterplay that, in my opinion. And then you pick, so you pick the Talon to go against it, right? So yeah, it definitely feels like they kind of forced the Hai onto Talon.
From the bell tolls.
Yeah, that's my clock.
Oh.
Anyway.
Time.
I don't necessarily agree that Talon was the worst pick they could have chosen. I agree with Thomas that I would attribute this small victory to Blue, because, as Thomas said, it wasn't first pick worthy for Cloud9, and maybe should have been the Yasuo, obviously. But I think I don't think Hai looked at it from the laning perspective, but rather the role he fulfills in Cloud9. He's not going to win many lanes or against those really amazing mid laners, so why not pick something that you can split push with, assassinate one target, and that's your own role. You have to be smart and you have to position yourself well. You don't necessarily have to have amazing mechanics like Yasuo, he has amazing mechanics or Zed, or good enough mechanics or Zed. So I think the Talon pick wasn't necessarily that bad, but they still should have done something about Yasuo, or camped him, or just do something. They just let him get to the point where they couldn't do anything. And that was really weird, because around 20 minutes, they were still equal in gold. So the teams weren't, there wasn't a stomp, it wasn't really just slowly suffocating Cloud9. They were equal around like 19, 20 minutes. But then it just went way downhill from them. So I think they just misplayed the power spikes, and they misplayed the strategy, not necessarily the picks.
You were talking about, well, Thomas brought up the pick bans and everything of the game. It's possible that Cloud9 could maybe have a problem with their pick ban phase if we look at game 2. Cloud9 first pick Zed, but they don't take the Janna counterpart with their team comp, which is kind of like getting a Rengar in your game and then not picking a Zillion or building a GA. So they pick Maokai pretty early on, which leaves Acorn to grab Rumble, which is a pretty good counter for Maokai. And we end up seeing Balls getting shut down as Rumble anyway. Do you think that if Cloud9 worked on their pick ban phase, maybe had some outside help from other regions alongside their actual coach, then they could get onto a higher level?
I think that's a stretch. I'm very reluctant to criticize their coach Charlie because he has been a big architect for. Well, no, I'm just saying. I don't think that what are you going to change? Okay, you're going to first pick Yasuo for sure. Okay, good strategy. But then what do you give up? Then you give Spirit Lee Sin. Do you think that you can counter Lee Sin? It's all the questions that you have going into a champion select, and I can see why they did what they did. I don't agree with it, but I'm not sure adding other voices aside from somebody like me saying, by the way, Dade's Yasuo is terrifying. It's terrifying enough that Samsung White's mid laner Pawn, who's also a really good Yasuo, they ban it from him. They don't want Dade to have a chance to have Yasuo. And Samsung White's like the one team that's really pushed blue recently. I mean, I don't think that would really help. I just think it's going to be something where obviously now they've got the tape to review from the series and they can learn from it. And that's all. I'll be honest. If you look at Game 4, yeah, Cloud9 was getting beat up pretty good. But at the same time, when they got the catch on Dade and the catch on Deft, and I think they got Spirit, they got somebody. They got a third one. They almost won that game, even with that really weird champion select phase. So I don't think it's something where you have to throw out the baby with the bathwater. I think there are just some little tweaks there, but I don't think extra voices would really help.
What is it that you personally think could be a big benefit to Cloud9 after watching the games?
Just experience. All this stuff, for all of Cloud9's accolades, they haven't had a ton of time to play against a Samsung or to play against an OMG or whatever. And Worlds is kind of like a stylistic melting pot. There is no team in North America that can do what OMG does. There just isn't. Or maybe someone tries and then they fall flat on their face. No team in North America, maybe TSM, but I don't. This is a bad analog. No team can do what Starhorn does. No team can do what White does in North America. So it's kind of like, okay, now that I've seen this, now that I've seen how they champion select, I get a better idea of it. I have experience in the matter, and maybe next time I have something to go on. Now, again, I'm not big on moral victories. I think that's insane. Cloud9 lost, and they should work on fixing it. Yeah. But I think if you're looking for something to learn from it, something to grow on, it's just, okay, we've now seen what these do. We can adapt our strategies going forward. That's all. That's what I think if I was a coach of C9, that's what I would be emphasizing.
Yeah. One of the benefits that Cloud9 has over just about any other organization in the West I can think of is just that roster consistency. Ever since they came in at the end of, in the summer of Season 3, they've had the same 5 guys that they've been able to play with and grow with and just take all of that experience. And every single chance they've gotten to play against some of these top teams, they've taken something back from it. I want to see what Cloud9 does if they can stay as this 5-man unit. I don't think there's anyone on that team. There's no need to panic. You ran into blue. Anyone who was going to run into blue in the quarterfinals was going to lose. That's just a terrible matchup for you guys. Maybe if you played a Royal Club, maybe if you played White Shield the way White Shield played on their turn, maybe things could have been different. But you were playing blue. They played well, their strategies were there, and they can learn from this. There are things they can pick up that they can apply to when they go back that I think could really set them apart from the rest of North America if they keep this right and if they take these lessons in their heart.
Something I'd like to see is Hyde expand his champion pool a bit. I mean, for the last 2 years, we've kind of seen him play mostly melee Assassin's Viz, Zud, now Talon, and his Syndra's gotten a lot better, but I've never been wowed by his like control mage skills, like Orianna, Syndra, whatever. I mean, like Syndra now is a lot better. I've said that, but most of the time, he doesn't excel. He doesn't shine as much on other mages the way he does on assassins, and I'd love to see him get better at that because his shot calling is, I don't know if I would say unique, but I don't know what other word to use right now. But it's very important to the way that C9 plays, and I wouldn't get rid of him just for maybe smaller champion pool. Just yet, not just yet at least.
Camille, do you have anything to add?
On Too High now, it's. I don't think he's necessarily needed. I don't think anyone needs a replacement in Cloud9. It's just the team, the players themselves, and as a whole are fine. I wouldn't swap anyone. I think that Meteors wasn't the best. Obviously, Spirit had those. I think the third game on Lee Sin was just insane. Spirit landed everything, like 100% of Qs, or more than 100. Yeah, let's say more than 100%. Because he landed
every Q he threw and some that he didn't.
Yeah, definitely. That's how good he was in that game. So, I'm not necessarily sure. Obviously, you can't play the same style that worked in NA against Koreans because they're gonna just see through it pretty easily. So, sure, they had some split pushes. They had a free Baron, which was really fun to watch. But I think they need to do something else. They need to. The champion pool is one thing, but I think they need to change their style a bit towards the blue-ish style with the heavy rotation focused and the lane swap focused game, because that's what they are good at. They're good at split pushing. They're good at diverting attention from what they're actually going for. So if they try to emphasize the style, it might be their biggest advantage over other teams. Because I don't think any team in NA or in Europe can do the same stuff Cloud9 can right now. And if they improve on it and focus on it, they can be definitely unbeatable in the West.
Well, I actually want to expand that point real quick. I think the important thing for both Cloud9 and TSM, and then you can include the European, you can include all the Western teams really in this, but these two in particular because they've now had best of 5 experience, live fire scenario in a big tournament. The off season is going to be really important. It's going to be, obviously you fell short. You need to decide as a team, are we going to put the work in to learn from it? Because there are some nuggets that both teams can learn from. And that's where you're going to see, where does Loco Doco and Reggie and whoever step in, and where does Charlie and High, and where does that, I think the off season is going to be really important. I sincerely hope, just as somebody that likes the game to continue to be more competitive, that isn't just this kind of this dead zone during the off season where, we're going to take a month and a half break and then we'll get in and we're going to get in the house and we'll scrim one day a week and then, LCS is in 2 weeks. You better scrim every day. No. You have a unique opportunity, and I really hope that the teams take advantage of it throughout the off season.
Okay, as much as I think we've all discussed talking about how the Western teams aren't as good as the Koreans, there's only so much you can say about that. I think it's time to move on to the Chinese versus the Chinese of EDG versus Star and Royal Club. First things first, Namei I want to talk about. Namei is the biggest thing that people talk about when they talk about EDG, and there was a lot of hype about Namei a long time before Worlds. Like, it was intense, like, Namei is the best AD carry in the world, etc. Then he comes to Worlds, and it's kind of like looking a bit double-lifty, So yeah, what is it like? I don't know how much you guys watch of LPL, but what is it do you think that Namei is doing differently, or what that his team's doing differently compared to how they played in LPL?
Well, I think the simple fact of the matter is Namei is this year's Samsung Ozone. Yep. Did he play poorly? No. But did he play to the level that he'd been billed? No. I think he didn't show up in the tournament, and it shows. Is EDG Namei and his 4 little friends that he carries all the time. No, that's Starhorn Royal Club with Uzi. But EDG, when one of your pillars is underperforming, it's tough to pull him back from that. And that's really what I got from him. He wasn't. You knew he wasn't going to win lanes in a lot of cases just because he's not really a laning AD carry. He's a lot like Deft in terms of positioning. But even in team fights, some of his positioning was confusing. So when I look at Namei, I'm just kind of like, all right, you didn't perform very well. You're this year's Samsung Ozone. Got to go back to the drawing board. That's how I look at him this go around.
I mean, you could see glimpses of it in that third game in this series where he was basically free to split push on this Lucian and do whatever the hell he wanted. That allowed him to really farm up, and as soon as those team fights rolled around, he got the kills and really, ended up being the guy who helped them close out that game. But it was just a matter of, I think, this bot lane from Royal Club. And I will say this, Thomas. I agree that Uzi is by far the best player, but I think Zero deserves some accolades in and of himself as well. I thought his Janna play was incredible this series. I thought, one of the biggest mistakes EDG made was letting Royal Club play Janna on that Game 5 after banning him for 2 games that worked out so well for him. And I think when, one of the things that Royal Club loves is when teams lane swap on them because they can go for this nice fast push and get people to play at this accelerated pace that they don't want to do. And that's not Namei's game. Those first couple games when you saw Namei really fall behind, it's because Uzi on his, on Twitch in Game 2 and on Lucian in Game 1 just pretty much got to do whatever he wanted in that 2v1 lane. And by the time that people had adjusted, Namei was already behind. And I think that certainly Namei has shown in the LPL that he has the potential to play a lot better than he has. I don't know if it's a mental thing. I don't know if it's, the world stage, shaking him up a bit. But I think he's got a lot of soul searching to do to figure out what it was that threw him off overall and what he can do to have more games like Game 3 and less games like every other game in this series, really.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, EDG is a pretty new team. They came out swinging, they took first place in China, and then they came here and they didn't show. And I hate saying that because I really do. But they just didn't play as well as anyone expected them to. They didn't play as well as anyone said they were capable of. I mean, it might be hard to say like how capable they would be against the rest of the world because we haven't seen them play against the rest of the world. Whereas, especially against Starhorn, players who have a lot more experience than them, and then I don't know. I think they'll be much stronger next year because they'll have that experience. I mean, you could even say the same about Cloud9 last year. New team, came with smashing in the LCS, went to Worlds, skipped the group stages, bought Fnatic. They just went home disappointed. Call it whatever you want, call it an experience, whatever. But they just played bad. They did the draft bad, and then they came back this year looking a lot stronger, didn't they? So I think EDG could be on a very similar path, and I hope they do, because I just hope they play well better next time.
Oh, I kind of disagree with the EGG becoming this better team as a rule, let's say.
Oh, okay,
I
don't mean it as a rule. But
they need at least one change, and I just can't imagine any top contender playing with someone like Koro. This guy is bad. Really bad. He had some good games, not saying he didn't. But his average is way bad. He just got caught many times in the lane. He played differently and quite inefficiently in team fights, in most team fights. And I understand he's not the guy to actually go. He's not the go-to guy for the EDG. He's kind of a role player. He's just doing his thing. Either he's right and he's gonna just farm and then do some damage, or he's gonna play the tank and be the mid shield for the rest, for Namei especially. But that's not gonna work. In the long run, you need someone who does it and is better. Somehow is better in lane, in decisions, in everything. About Namei being top 1 in the world, ADC or whatever Monta said, that's just bollocks. That's really not true. And it's the thing with the ADCs who are really active, the aggressive ones like Uzi, to the AD carries who are awesome in teamfights, but they are rather they would rather stay back and just do the damage and be safe and not die, like Deft. Those players like Deft rely on their team way more than Uzi does, because even when the Starhound Royal Club were losing, Uzi was still ahead, and he was doing way more than he should have been able to do. So I think it's rather stylistically, I don't see Namei ever being, at least in my book, the best ADC in the world. I think he underperformed, but I don't think he's gonna be as good as Uzi ever, or Imp, or Uzi and Imp would be the top two. He's not gonna reach that level ever again, just because his team is not gonna allow him to do it without at least one change, probably more, but yeah, at least one change.
Well,
Thomas, it looks like you're itching to say something when you were listening to that.
I guess my question is, kind of paralleling to a discussion we had about Amazing, does Namei need to be this guy that's out ahead, spastically aggressive, playing hard? Not every team is created that way. I think, I do kind of take issue with bashing on Deft a little bit here. Deft ruled the group stage. Yes, did Sneaky beat him up pretty good in a big surprise in that game? Absolutely. But Namei and Deft, stylistically, are a lot alike. And for what they have to do for their team, which is stand in the back and be a turret, they do it really well. And obviously, I'm completely simplifying it. They're positioning things and orb walkouts that you have to be able to do as an AD carry at the top level, but I don't think Namei needs to be Uzi. I think that team doesn't really need that. I think that there might be some tweaks going on. I'll be interested to see what happens with EDG, because the Chinese LOL scene is pretty savage when one of their teams loses, and particularly with EDG, who came in with a lot of expectations. How does that team respond? That'll be a great storyline moving forward. I don't know offhand, but it's something to work on, and maybe they will change something, but I don't know. That's just my personal thought on that whole. I don't think Namei needs to be like Uzi for his team to be successful.
Just to correct, I'm just gonna defend myself. Sorry, Chase. I don't want Namei to be like Uzi, this really hyper-aggressive one, but I'm just saying that he's more team-reliant than those players. And that's not necessarily a good thing, because I can see Uzi carrying the game where his team isn't doing well. I can't see Namei doing the same when his team is just plainly not showing up for the game. That's my thing. And I'm also not bashing on Deft. Deft isn't blue. His team is never going to be like completely crap. That's not going to happen. So that's a different scenario completely. So that's just that.
All I will say is, when you judge a player based on one event, a very small sample size of games in the overall scheme of things, you are writing off a lot of information. Do we want to judge Namei by a Worlds where he, admittedly did not show up at the level we expected of him, but still had a couple, very good games here and there, and then just completely, ignore everything he did at the LPL for 2 splits in a row now, what he did in the Chinese qualifiers when he took Royal Club and won, beat Royal Club in a series 2-1. I mean, he was a big part of that series, and I think that if you ignore all of that information because in this one event he didn't step up, you're making a bit of a mistake. I personally think that Namei can more than recover from this. I think he's a very good AD carry, and sure, he's never going to be the hard carry that you can imagine, like I would say like a Uzi or think about a Vasily in North America, this guy that's constantly going for kills. But, that's not always what every team needs. You build a team to work together. This game is too much of a team-based game for any one individual when they take all the glory to be able to take it out. And what you saw, look at Game 3, when Uzi was able to have those insane stats on Twitch, 858, it didn't matter. He didn't get his team any closer to winning. He looked great, but it didn't make the team any better. And maybe sometimes you need a guy like Namei who does make his team better in every situation. And maybe it's not enough to win games when they've already been lost, but I think he can be a guy that can post his team up in a way that that I don't think a player like Uzi, who goes go for the kills and is very gold centric on his own, can do. They have different rules, and different teams need different things. So I wouldn't rule him out just based off this one event. Nor would I say that because he's a guy that is a little bit more reliant on team fighting to show off his true skill. I don't take that as a negative when you build a team on team fighting. What EDG needs to do is go into the offseason and make sure that every decision they make is based off who they want to be next time around.
I kind of feel like as we're talking about these Chinese teams, like the people of China talk are just sitting judging us with glaring eyes thinking, you don't know much about Chinese League as we do. How dare you speak about Chinese League of Legends when we have a show about it on our own?
Just don't make a mistake of checking your Twitter during the show like I did. Just wait till later.
The one last interesting thing that I wanted to bring up before we move on to the next game was of Game 2 versus Starham Royal Club versus EDG. Koro has had basically, Rise has had one loss in 10 games in the entire of the quarterfinals, and Koro is the person that delivered that loss. We just take that in for a second. Yeah. Alright, next game anyway. Najin White Shield versus OMG. This is probably the game I've been most excited to talk about, just because I called it a long time ago. Okay, so Najin White Shield aren't exactly the kind of team when you think of super Korean teams. Najin White Shield aren't like, yes, that's one of the best teams in Korea, that's so amazing, like they're gonna stomp everyone at World. It was like they came in, not many people really knew that much about them, but they were still kind of expected to do better than everyone just because they're Korean. 2 seconds.
She doesn't have her stats prepared. Burn her.
Don't know. Don't burn me. No, I was gonna say, I think that a lot of people just assumed that Najin White Shield were gonna beat OMG because of how, first of all, because they're Korean, which I've already said, and second of all, because of OMG's performances before when they were playing with Dade. Now, Dade has been an interesting topic lately because of his support skills, but fortunately for OMG, we saw them bring in Cloud, and we didn't really know how he was going to do, but he outperformed Dade, like, amazingly. Like, he totally... We needed Cloud in that game. Like, OMG needed Cloud in that game to get out of that. What do you guys think about what happened with Najin White Shield, though? What do you think are the main mistakes that they made in these 3 games?
Their draft phase was bad.
Yeah, giving
They-
Go
they-
Go
they like-
Rise
yeah,
is
they-
a problem.
That's the equivalent of having Dade on Yasuo every game almost. I mean, to their level, but still, you shouldn't be giving Going Rise every game, or whenever possible.
It was amazing. I mean, they had that first game where Going had a very good Aurelia game, and Loveland did great on Lee Sin, and so White Shield just completely overreacted. It's like, okay, ban Aurelia, ban Lee Sin. We don't want to see any of this. And so the Jace and the Rise, Jace and Rise come through, and then they hard carry that game, and there's nothing that White Shield can do. And even though that game took a lot longer than it probably should, it was just a completely dominant performance. And then in Game 3, you have the first pick. You know what Going's Rise can do, and you just let it through anyway. I mean, it was rough. And, it's one of those things where, I know a lot of people went in with White Shield saying, like, oh, this is, they're not a top 3 Korean team. Ignore the fact that they got second place in OGN Spring. Ignore the fact that their loss in OGN Summer was a best of 5 to the KT Arrows, who won OGN Summer. I think they were both overestimated and underestimated, depending on what crowd you talk to. But at the end of the day, you can't make these kinds of draft mistakes. And it amazes me that a team that has so much best of 5 experience could just not have their head in the game to this level.
Also, I'm sorry. You go ahead.
No, go ahead. You haven't talked very much. I've been talking too much, please.
I've been feeling a little under the weather, but no, I was just gonna bring up that I found it really weird that Najin White Shield they never played their Janna Zed, but instead they picked melee assassins into Janna, or they left Janna up and then they picked, I think it was the second game or something, they drafted Zed and Kha'Zix's first rotation.
Zed Kha'Zix.
Yeah, and then
It was the second game.
yeah, but they left Janna there. They could have just taken Zed Janna. Oh, let's just take melee assassins and pick them into Janna. That's gonna be a good idea. And they could. I don't understand their draft phase at all in these 3 games. Like they make Zed Janna popular? Why did they just let it through? Why did they let the Janna through so easily when they were picking melee assassins? I don't get it.
Well, I think we've all hit the nail on the head so far with the problems in champion select for Najin White Shield. But when you looked at this team, you knew that Save and Goong were strong. That was kind of the bedrock of it. Yes, Zephyl was solid. Gorilla really showed up in the tournament. But then you had 2 watches. You had the good watch and you had the bad watch. Mm-hmm. Good watch was one of the primary reasons that Najin White Shield made the doggone tournament. Bad watch gives you multiple facepalm moments and you just sort of want to curl up in the fetal position after about an hour of it. That was on display against OMG. But just to kind of move the conversation along a little bit, I want to talk about OMG and how much better this team looks with Cloud. You break down OMG during the group stage, and the general consensus is Going and Cool are going to get theirs. Loveling's going to be effective as well. But do those 3 players have enough to pick up the anchor that was the OMG bottom lane? Obviously, the quarterfinals showed something completely different. OMG was dynamic, they were effective, and they look ridiculously strong. I'm sure we'll get into it when we talk about the semifinals, but this team is a scary team going forward. So I guess my feeling is, don't take away from what OMG was able to do. Yes, Najin White Shield made mistakes, but OMG did a great job of taking advantage of those mistakes.
Oh yeah, certainly. I mean, you look at Going had that amazing play with the teleport where he canceled it, and when he realized he would have been caught by the Namei bubble, that was just incredible. It was one of those plays. I had a friend come over for those games who had never watched professional League of Legends before, and he was like, "Oh my God, that was amazing." And when someone who doesn't necessarily understand what's going on can realize that you did something incredible, that's a play that I think you're going to point to and just say, yes, Going is really, really good. But this was everything coming together for them. I mean, Loveland played the way that he played back at, when we were talking about him as the best jungler in China in All-Stars. He was consistently very good. And you look at San really got to step up. Now they had a decent, support. And it's not like Cloud had to necessarily be this amazing player, even though his Janna was very good in all 3 games that he got to play it. But just being able to have someone that put you in a position to finally, to be able to do something, not someone that you can trust to hit a skill shot every once in a while, someone you can trust to remember to ward the right places so you can feel comfortable during your laning phase. I mean, these are just small things that you forget that San hasn't been playing with for a long time. And it was just so much fun to watch him finally get to have that freedom. And when those things are going well, then Going and Cool get to be like, oh yeah, we're the amazing solo laners that have defined this team as the strongest, as the 2 strongest at their position in China for a long time. And it's just so much fun to watch. I loved watching these guys. Even as someone who liked White Shield and picked White Shield, I could not have been happier to be wrong given the way OMG played that series.
Yeah, I kind of agree that it's quite unbelievable how far they went from the group phase to the quarterfinal. It wasn't the same team, and Cloud was playing well, and Sound is a player who was quite downplayed by the community just simply because his peers from China are Uzi and Namei, so he was supposed to be the ugly child that, now he's there, but just ignore him. But he's really good, actually, and both on Lucian and on Corki, he did his job, and he did it way more efficiently than I expected him to do it. I don't think Cloud was necessarily the god of supports. Obviously, if you compare Dade to Cloud, it may seem to look like it, but he was doing his job. Yes, Well, yeah, let's say this. But Cloud was doing all he could, and that allowed Sam to play better. And now I don't really see a strong disadvantage or a weakness in OMG, and that's going to be quite problematic. Obviously, there were other things like Najin White Shield got flanked 3 or 4 times from nowhere by Going, who actually just rushed 1 into 4 and tanked everything he could, and they were still running. They couldn't really focus on anything because they were scared most of the time in those games at least. So that's that, so no wording really. But yeah, that's a strong team, and I'm looking forward if they can keep up this level, because I'm not sure. The difference between the group phase and the quarterfinals was so huge. I'm not sure if it's going to be on the same level from now on or just drop down a little. Because obviously if you get a new player, you may have this quick boost in confidence or whatever you may call it, and be amazing for a couple games, just like Amazing in TSM was amazing for a couple of games, then, you know. But yeah, I think if they keep up this level, that's almost or a Korean level of play.
One last thing that I want to touch on this game before we move on to the discussion of the semi-finals next week is the fact that Najin White Shield's vision controls seem to be pretty off. In Game 2, we see them constantly getting caught, and their vision really isn't very good, and that's why they're getting caught. In Game 1, they don't ward Baron around 20 to 25 minutes, and OMG just got a free Baron from it. I mean, this is pretty simple problems that they're running into, basic vision control. Thomas?
No, I wanted to say, you brought up the 25-minute Baron, and I wanted to jump in on that. That was series turning. I don't think you can underrate how big a deal that Baron secure by OMG was. At the time, Najin White Shield had momentum, and with a Cassid and Zed, you know, what are you going to do? If you screw up a team fight at all and Najin White Shield wins, barring a miracle series of events, that's an ace. And even at 25 minutes, an ace is a couple of towers or an inhibitor or, you know, whatever. I could say that ad nauseum. But instead, OMG gets the Baron, they win a team fight shortly thereafter. It's a tie game, and from there it just looked like Najin White Shield for the next 2.5 games just completely went into the tank. It was stunning for me to watch.
I agree, because I think all series I was mostly impressed not only by Going, but how confident OMG seemed to play. They were so crisp with their decisions, and I know we kind of already talked about Cloud, but I think having Cloud on the team, like Kamil said, he's not a god, but I think having his presence on the team was important because he's not Dade. So when you have someone, I'm sorry, but when you have someone who's not a complete, if you've been playing with a potato and then you get out of the group stages, oh thank God we got out of the group stages, then you play with, right, let's remove the potato and get a player. I think you would just be more confident, wouldn't you?
Dade the potato, confirmed on Into the Rift 2014. Go ahead, Jay.
I don't want to be too mean to him, because as people have pointed out on Reddit, this is a guy who played because he was asked to play. He literally never asked for
I'm not trying to bash Dade, but but I'm talking about the team mentality. Whatever. Whatever, you missed that many Namei ults, you're gonna get something. I'm not saying like he should like uninstall League, okay? I'm just saying, when you have a better player like that on your team, you're gonna play more confident.
I'm not saying he shouldn't install League, but he should probably only play normals and ARAMs. That's what you basically just said.
I didn't say that. Those are your words. I may have thought it, but I didn't say it.
I'll say this. I think OMG played with a level of confidence that I was surprised we didn't have in White Shield. It really did seem like that Baron just shook their system. Like, they weren't expecting it. You know, they'd been playing the objective game very well in Game 1 up until that point. You know, that kind of been the way that they'd gotten that gold lead. They were getting all the dragons, I think, up until that point, if I remember correctly. They were able to transition around in towers, and it really felt like they had control of that game. And as soon as they lost that control, it's like they didn't know what to do. It's like they just hadn't imagined the situation in which OMG would turn the tables on them. And I've made this point before, but I feel teams that only have one way to win put themselves at a huge disadvantage when something goes wrong with their plan because they don't know what to do. You have to have some backup plan. It doesn't even have to be a good one, just something you can fall back on and at least act with confidence. And it never happened. Their warding was never the same. From every game, it got worse and worse as things got worse. The pick and ban phase became, like I said, that huge overreaction in game 2. I mean, it's hard to feel like that wasn't nerves. And it's hard to understand where that's coming from, given the amount of experience they've had in best of fives, other than maybe they just felt this enormous pressure of being team, playing a non-Korean team, knowing that if they ever did lose, Inven was going to come hard on them. But that's something, I mean, if you're the Najin management right now, you have to look at that and wonder, where did we go wrong and what could we have done? Because we've given them all this preparation for exactly this situation, and it's like their minds just went blank. I've never seen anything like it. And even people who thought that OMG was going to win, I don't think anyone expected that White Shield would look as bad as they did in those last 2 games. I mean, it was hard to watch. No pun intended there either.
Does anyone else have anything to add on the Najin White Shield versus OMG games? Because it was pretty straightforward what happened. We saw what Flame did on that top lane. Flame, it's Flame? I've got Flame on the brain, don't blame me, okay? Save, last of the carry top laners. Very interesting thing to call them. Anyway, moving on to the next things that we kind of want to discuss is the semi-finals. These games are going to be Samsung Blue versus Samsung White, and almost a National White Shielder, and OMG versus Star on Royal Club. Okay, guys, so the first game we'll talk about is Samsung White versus Samsung Blue. This will be an interesting game because a lot of the time we've seen Samsung Blue beat Samsung White, and they are the team that will that will beat them in this tournament, if anyone. Do you all think that? Well, what do you guys think is going to be the outcome of these games, pretty much?
Well, okay, I'll go first. Give me
First.
well, there was pregnant pauses are terrible in live shows. Believe me, I've had that beaten into my head. But anyway, give me Blue 3-1, quite honestly. And I'm siding with history on this one. The past 2 champion seasons, Blue 3-1.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think you can tell that much from their play. Are you going to argue with me that Samsung White blew out their group a little bit harder than Blue? Yeah, they did. They didn't lose. But, okay, so Samsung White blew out TSM a little bit harder because they styled and gave up their win, whereas Cloud9 managed to punch Blue in the mouth and beat him in a game? Okay. I think that Samsung White is a very bad stylistic matchup for Blue. In order for Samsung White to win, they have to get such a big lead that when Samsung Blue comes back, and they're going to come back because Lord knows that's what they've done for the past 6 months, they can't. It just short circuits the entire plan. Or if they do, it's ineffective because they're too far behind. So I don't see Samsung White being able to execute the level that Blue is going to be just dropped to the mat and not able to get back up. It's that simple to me. I think there's too much history there. You can maybe argue that the Blue made a lot of hay in the lane swap meta, and the lane swap meta is not as prolific anymore, but it's still there. We've seen lane swaps. So White can't lane swap, which means they can't really play Twitch effectively because Blue is better at lane swapping, and you don't really want Twitch to go into a 2v2 very early. And that's a pillar of White that you can't really do. We've talked about Pawn versus Dade. Pawn cannot play Yasuo unless they first pick it, and Dade might have a counter pick that we haven't seen. I don't really know. I would give Dade the best chance of anybody having a counter pick to Yasuo because Dade is the best Yasuo in the world. He knows what messes it up. So I think it's a bad stylistic matchup, but at the same time, if White has figured out to be able to find that extra gear in the first 20 minutes, they could come through, but I just don't think it's going to happen on a consistent enough basis.
I think that an important thing to remember before we continue with your other 3 opinions on the game is that a lot of people will say that Samsung White have looked stronger than Samsung Blue in the world so far, but what people need to remember is that Samsung White have had hell of a lot easier games than Samsung Blue have had. Their group was like nothing compared to Samsung Blues group. Like, okay, they had like the one Brazilian team, but still, Cloud9 and Alliance were probably going to give them a bigger run for their money than what Samsung White had in their game.
That was Najin.
Yeah.
Najin.
Najin.
I
got
get messed up
confused.
sometimes. I know.
You've been programming
I
all
get
day. It happens.
confused.
It happens.
Aha, yes. This is what happens when you program. You don't understand English anymore. But yeah, so Stephen, what do you think? Your turn.
I think it's gonna be pretty similar to what Thomas said, 3-1 for Blue, because yeah, I'm a history major. I think history's gonna repeat itself. I don't unfortunately have a lot more to add to what Thomas said. He took a lot of the words out of my mouth. But damn you, Thomas! I don't talk much because I'm feeling sick, and then when I finally have something to say here to say it, but I'm putting my faith in Dade right here. That's all I have to say. That Thomas didn't say.
Camille.
I mean,
Oh,
go ahead, Camille.
that was beautiful. That was
Go ahead.
perfect. Cheers.
I was just gonna say, I really love this Blue team. I've watched this team, for the last 6 months, and they're just so solid from start to finish. Now, White, if you're gonna point to White, and you really want to believe White can do this, you point to the fact that you have Mata, who is the best support in the world. That's a fact. That's going to help. You point to Dade, who you can make a very good case is the best jungler in the world. I don't think the gap between him and a jungler like Spirit is as big as the gap between Mata and the next best support is. But it's still, you can make that argument. Dade's very consistently good, and he's going to be very tough to bully. And Pon's got an amazing champion pool, just like Dade does. So that's going to be a great one-on-one matchup. Here's my thing. Thomas hit it on the head already, but I'm going to reiterate. White only wins this series if they blow away the early game. They have to do it 3 times. And remember, this is a team, these are sister teams. They've scrimmaged against each other all the time. Blue knows the tricks. Blue knows what White is going to try to do to steamroll that game early. And sure, you can say, well, White also knows what Blue's going to try to do to hold that off. But I think as a general rule, it's a lot easier to force a game at least into the mid and late game before it's decided than to perfectly steamroll something, no matter how many, there are only so many options you can get to win every lane the way that White is going to have to do. I don't see them doing it 3 times. I can see them doing it once for sure. I'm sure they're going to get 1 game. I could see it happening twice. But Dade and the rest of that team, I can't see it happening 3 times. Blue is too good across the board to lose the early game 3 times in a row. And if we learned anything, that game 4 against TSM showed that the longer the game goes on, the weaker White's shot calling gets, and you cannot afford that luxury against Blue.
Obviously, I can't agree with Thomas because I don't know. I just can't agree with Thomas. I think, yeah, there is loads of history there, but I would use it as a counter argument. Because there is so much history between those 2 teams, what do you think they were doing? What do you think White was preparing for since they were qualified for the Worlds? They were preparing to fight Blue. Because let's be real, everyone talked about Blue versus White as the top 2, right? So from that on, and especially when the groups were announced and they knew exactly at which point they will meet, because let's face it, if you're White or Blue, whoever else you get, you're probably gonna go through. There's like little to no chance that something upsets those matches. So I think White focusing on those games may have not shown everything so far, everything they have so far in the tournament. I still think they have some, special tactics, maybe not, but some things. They have to have something. I believe they have to have something. And I believe that this history doesn't have to repeat itself. Sure, Blue historically looking won, but that's not going to always be the same. Because if the history would repeat itself all the time, we wouldn't really have much, to watch. It wouldn't be interesting anymore, because we would know all the results after every tournament, right? So I think White can take it. I think they're strong enough early game. Sure, they do random stuff that may cause some really bad situations and may even lose them games just from one bad call. But they needed to prepare for Blue, and if they didn't, they may as well disband, because they're never going to be the world champions if they don't win against Blue now. That's their only chance, I think, and that's going to motivate them, and just they're going to take it. 3-1, 3-2, don't care. They just need to win. Because they just need to win, because I want Imp in the final. That's the only reason, selfish reason, but I want Imp in the final, styling on anyone. Just want a styling.
Just to throw my 2 cents in, I also think that I'll go in Blue's favour. I think that the games might be a little bit closer than what you guys think. I think it'll be a 3-2 maybe.
Okay.
Maybe that's just because I want to believe in Imp like Camille does. But whatever, that's a good enough reason for me. The next games of the semis is going to be OMG versus Starhorn Royal Club. I'm going to start with the lovely Steven this time to give his opinion, because he's not feeling very well, so let's give him some attention.
Wow, okay. Alright, first of all, I have to admit I don't watch LPL as much because I don't want to screw up my sleep schedule worse than it is, although I probably will be watching next year. But I'm going to give it 3-2 to OMG, only because they just impressed me so well. But it's going to be 3-2 either way, but I want to believe it's OMG. The reason why I think it's going to be 3-2 is just because both teams I feel like they've played a lot better in bracket stage than they did in group stages. So I think they're finally getting warmed up for the tournament. Second of all, well, I don't think it's going to be a stomp either way. I think these teams know each other too well for that to happen. And, I mean, first of all, they're going to ban Rise from Go-Going.
Hopefully.
They've better... If Go-Going gets Rise, I'm going to sit there and be like, the god is here. They're going to win. But I am excited to see them. I think they're both really aggressive teams. I think they're both really thirsty for winning. Because OMG, they got knocked out really early last year. And Royal, they flopped in the finals last year against SKT. I think it's just going to be 3-2 either way. It's going to be aggressive.
Well,
Thomas.
for me, it's a really interesting matchup. You know, we spent probably 15 minutes singing the praises of Cloud. Well, now we get to see against a really, really good bot lane. I'm not saying Zephyr Gorilla is bad, but I'm saying a bot lane that has been performing very, very well. Now we get to see, this is going to be the test. It was Cloud, did he show up for that 3-game series, or is it that he's there and OMG is rocking and they're just going to tear it all the way up to the finals? I personally think that OMG has had that random confluence of events that the team has come together and they are a force to be reckoned with. I think OMG 3-1 over Starhorn. I know they've played each other a lot, and agreed with Steven, if Go-Going gets Rise, then the entire Starhorn Royal Club coaching staff, I just kind of want to be like, why? You can meme that if you want, but I think that OMG's just they're tearing them up, and I kind of look at this the same way. It's an interesting foil for the white-blue game. Starhorn Royal Club is a sledgehammer. They are going to swing really, really, really hard, and if they hit you, they're probably going to beat you. But if you manage to dodge a couple of sledgehammer swings early, Starhorn Royal Club is gettable. You can get them. You can beat them. And that's going to be the rub. I think OMG can manage the Starhorn sledgehammer enough to where they'll come out on top. I think 3-1, but at the same time, if OMG plays the way they played against Najin Shield and Starhorn Royal Club screws up Champion Select even half as bad, I think OMG is going to run away with this one.
Yeah, I have a lot of faith in OMG personally. The way I look at it, yes, Royal Club has a great bot lane. Uzi is very good. He will get his kills, and even if you play really well, he's going to find a way to get his. That's just how he plays. Zero does a great job of setting him up and keeping him alive, so whenever he overextends, he somehow finds a way to, avoid death and avoid giving away the shutdown gold or whatever else. And that is awesome. However, Sand and Cloud are not a bad bot lane. I think Sand showed himself in that last series. Cloud is a big upstep. And then, what's the top lane matchup? It's Go-Going versus Cola. I'm sorry, Cola is not on Go-Going's level. I don't care if you ban Rise. He's not on Go-Going's level. What's the mid lane matchup? Oh, it's Cool versus Corn. Cool is, I mean, if you ban the Fizz, which is Corn's really nice pocket pick, and don't get me wrong, Corn's Fizz is very impressive, but I don't know what else you do if you're Corn. Cool is just the best mid laner in China, and I don't think Corn is particularly close at this point. To me, that's really what I look at. I look at it and say, if Loveland plays at his best and Insect doesn't get Rengar or Lee Sin, what the heck does Insect do? You know, he has those 2 champions where he's really great, but his third guy is not going to be on the same level as Loveland's third guy or Loveland's second guy. If OMG plays this right, I think this can be a 3-0. I'm going to say a 3-1 because there's going to be a crazy Uzi game, and never underestimate the power of the AD carry to hard carry from the bot lane. But, you know, if a 3-0 happens, I will not be surprised.
Yeah, I would even go for 3-0. Probably, because if they keep the level from Najin White Shield, then yeah, that's going to be a stomp. Even if Uzi plays well, there's no guarantee his team will follow up on this form and perform even half as good as Uzi can. Also, when Sahon was winning against EDG, in those games they were still throwing Barons, they were still throwing Dragons, they were doing really dodgy stuff. So, and when OMG was winning, there wasn't really a point where it all went shaky. They were winning a bit harder, and they were just stomping at one point. It just went well throughout the entire game. Obviously, there were some picks, maybe some not the best trades where someone could have run away maybe or something, but overall, Starhorn Royal Club is the shaky team that requires Uzi to hard carry. I don't think anyone else can hard carry, definitely not Kola, maybe Insect, but you know, Insect is gonna do just so much. He can't really kill the entire enemy team. He can kill the carry, but you kill one carry. They have 2 more. What do you do now? You just die and just fall back? There's no... I think Royal Club doesn't have a alternative plan to Uzi at this point. They were playing some other stuff in the groups, but now they're just focused. Uzi can win, Uzi will win, we'll just focus on Uzi. And that's just one plan, and that's not gonna work 3 times. That may not even work once. And I think that probably should be maybe 3-1, but I would go for 3-0. I really think Going is gonna stomp. And I think I just want Sam to finally win against Uzi. I want Sam to prove everyone that he's not trash, as people think he is for some bizarre reasons. I just want some of those IMG guys to prove. Especially, it's going to be a Cinderella story if they win, because they would... Against the LGD, to qualify to the World, they weren't really that great. They were barely winning. They were 1-0, and they lost the first game. The second game, they were behind by a lot. They barely sneaked into Worlds, and if they go to the finals, that's the best storyline you can get, right? So that's why I'm cheering for OMG.
I'm going to have to go with you, as I do also think that OMG are going to win. I think they've got a lot more talent to work with. I think that they're looking a lot stronger. I think that even based off, I'm not going to pretend to be a Chinese expert here, but I watched some of the LPL later on in the season, and I do think that, I still think that even if OMG don't particularly win, I still think they look like they have the potential to be a stronger team than all of the other Chinese teams, to be honest. Okay, so that was the last for our discussion of the semis and quarterfinals. Now we're going to move on to the question and answer part of the show, where we take your questions from chat and we will get the panelists to answer them. So the first question that we've got, another thing that I have to say, when I pronounce your names, when I say whose question it is, I'm not very good at pronouncing names because I'm English, so I can't speak more than one language, and it's like the most simple language. So bear with me on this one. Okay, so the first question is from Winroot. We'll go with that. What happened to Namei to earn Dade's award for not showing at Worlds? Is he lacking international experience? Who wants to have a go at that one?
I don't know his history offhand, but I don't think so. He's been in the LPL a while, as before EDG he was the carry for Positive Energy. Yeah. I think it was just sometimes it's a mental block, sometimes you just don't show up. And that's kind of a cop-out reason, but I don't know the specifics of it. I believe he was sick before the start of the group stage, and like hospitalized sick from bad noodles or some such. And when that happened, he never was able to get any momentum, and his confidence took a hit, particularly right out the gate. On top of that, he got torched by Imp and Mata. So I think it was just like negativity, and he couldn't pull himself out of it. But specifics as to what happened to him, I can't say. I'm sorry.
I definitely
have one more.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I mean, I think it's hard maybe to say that he got the Dade award, because Dade's champion pool got nerfed, and then they just took everyone lightly. I don't think EDG took anyone lightly. I think it was just an unfortunate circumstance that he got sick, whatever. I mean, you can even say that from last year when Tabe got sick before the finals, and then they just played really bad after that. I think it was just an unfortunate circumstance.
Okay, the next question is from Froskerin over at China Talk, who's judging us.
Mostly me.
Who do you think are the best players in their positions attending Worlds? You create a team in LCS order, so top lane to support. Who wants to tackle this one?
Is it?
Chase, I can see your face.
I got an idea. Let's see, top lane, I'm going to go with Going right now. I think his rise was just absolutely incredible. I think he, at his best, has shown that he's capable of, kind of carrying a game from that position. His mechanics have been really strong. And everything, I'm not a Chinese expert, but everything I've heard says that his champion pool is deeper than even we have seen right now. And if that is true, then he is truly a terrifying force, because he's done everything that we would usually expect a top laner to play right now, and done really well with it. Especially, that last series, I think he just did an amazing job. As far as junglers go, I'm going to go with Dade, just consistently really, really, really good. Constantly putting himself in the position he needs to get those team fights that Blue needs and get the picks that they can use to kind of get the game going in their direction. I'm not really shocking anyone there with that one, I'm sure. I'm going to go with his teammate Dade for the best mid. Dade is the best mid until someone takes it from him. You saw that Yasuo game. He is incredible when he gets the champions that he is best at, and his pool is deep enough in this current meta that it's going to be really hard to find something he's not really, really good at. Sure, when he's not in his pool, you can maybe have some problems, but at this Worlds right now, he is in his comfort zone, and he's done a great job in every game that he's gotten. AD carry, I go for Uzi. Uzi right now just making all the plays for himself that he can possibly muster and grabbing all the kills that he could possibly ask for. And then support is Mata. I don't know if anyone would ever question that Mata is the best support in the world right now, but if you have any questions, go look at games 1 and 2 of that series against TSM. Look at the amazing way he has all the wards that he places, all the skill shots he hits, just his game sense, and there's no one like him in the world right now in that position. That's my top 5.
There is one person. There is one guy who could contend for the title.
Who is that?
Best clock sound ever.
I think it was just chiming for the name that I am about to announce.
No.
Who is the next Mata, the best support in the world incoming? Well, I think R7. He is truly a hero.
Yeah, in a different universe, maybe, but...
Should we do like an alternate pick where we pick the 5 worst players that
I'm up for it.
No, I'd rather not burn bridges here.
Okay. I want to get one more person's view on this, because I think that obviously that's Chase's opinion on the top 5 players at Worlds. So, Camille, it's your turn. Who would you like to?
Yeah, starting from the bottom, I would take Uzi definitely because he showed up big, but I wouldn't take Mata. And I'm not arguing. Mata is by far the best support by a mile. He can't even see the competition. He's that far ahead. But Uzi needs someone else. He needs Zero because he needs a caretaker. He doesn't need a support that roams around, does different stuff. He needs someone just staying with him and not letting him die when he goes just mental. He just jumps towards the enemy, and he needs someone to go like, yeah, just shield, exhaust, what else can I do so he doesn't die?
This is
Right
not
away.
LCS. This is support first. We're going from top to support.
Nah,
That was
okay.
part of the question.
He doesn't give a damn.
It's
No, that's okay.
specified in the
From-
question. It
from the
matters to
top-
our audience.
From the top, I'll definitely go going. If he's gonna play Rice, and I'm just play Rice, don't play anything else. Remove bans at all, just play Rice. The jungle, Dandy probably would be the best. Not sure if there is any other player that showed up at Worlds that much. Loveling had some good games, Insect had some good games, but those are individual situations, just separate occasions. So Dandy probably was the biggest stumper so far. And from the mid lane, it's quite hard. I'm not sure who would I pick. Probably it's between Pawn and Dade. Think I would
Between
pick.
Pawn and Dade.
Yeah, I'm not sure if Dade is. They're obviously both awesome, but I don't know. I would probably go Pawn. I think I just like Pawn stylistically a bit more, but that's just a personal preference. And he may have worked better with Dandy, especially. And the bottom lane, as I said, just Uzi with the caretaker, pretty much. There's just no one else. If you have Uzi, you have to have someone like that. Mata wouldn't work.
Mata can be anything you want him to be. He's the best support in the world. You're
Mata is like
insane.
Sand.
I'm not saying he is the best support in the world, but when he leaves Uzi for a second to ward, Uzi's gonna die because that's how he plays. And he just needs someone. I don't think Uzi is the best individually in terms of just going back. He's the best when you fight. When you fight, he just goes mental, kills 1 guy, 2 guys, 3 guys. He survives on 10 HP. At one point, he jumped in with 100 HP towards 3 guys. And
That is true. That happened.
that's not normal. That's not even solo queue level. There isn't level like that. That's Wood 8 or something. You do such a random thing, the other team just goes. They're stuck. They just don't understand your move, and they don't have enough time to actually analyze why you did it, and they just die. That's the only explanation I have why it worked in that situation. But because statistically, it shouldn't have ever worked. So yeah, the caretaker 0 with Uzi.
Okay.
Okay, so the next question we have is from Umirin, and it's, why does everyone underrate Looper, the top laner with the highest KDA over the course of Season 4, doubling every other top laner? Who wants to take it?
I'll take a stab at this one. I think Looper is in what many would consider a lucky position, but potentially a bad position for his personal brand, in that he's on a team of stars. Mm-hmm. Look who he's playing with. Dandy, you want to know what kind of personality you have when you have Dandy on your team? Watch that interview that he gave when Samsung Blue was playing Cloud9, or maybe that was the next game. Anyway, after Samsung White had advanced, Dandy was just, he's a smack talker, he's a brash guy. It makes him, to me, hilarious, but he eats up the spotlight. There have been times where Dandy, even like during Winter, when White was winning a series, was like, screw this, I'm going to play Zed jungle because I want the headlines. It's like, wait, Zed, no, no, this is not what you're supposed to do. But he did it anyway because he just wanted to get kills. And then you look at Imp and Mata. Imp is a lot of the same. And then Mata gets all the hype as best support in the world. Pawn gets also underrated for the same reason. But Looper is just kind of that consistent guy. He's not out there. He's always come off to me as kind of the quiet guy in the background. And because he doesn't have this soundbite where he's like, man, I hope we take Blue out back and beat the tar out of them because blah, blah, blah. He doesn't really talk trash, or at least he doesn't talk trash publicly. And so he just kind of delivers. And in some ways, that's kind of what you want when you've got a team of, quite frankly, egos surrounding him in many cases.
Anyone else want to elaborate on that a little bit more before we move on to the last question?
Well, I'm just not sure where it came to play that he's the most why Loop is so underrated. Doesn't everyone fawn over his TP plays, his coordination?
Yeah, but I think when you put it through the lens of underrated on his team. You know, when we're talking Samsung White, I mean, we talk Samsung White and nobody, including I brought up Looper. And I think that my reasoning, that was kind of what I got from it.
Okay, that's fine.
He's consistently very, very good. Like, I mean, there's nothing wrong with being consistently very, very good. If Looper is getting all the attention, something's probably gone wrong with that particular game. He does his best when he's fulfilling whatever role the team needs for him to fill, and he's got amazing mechanics to fill whatever role they do need. I mean, I think Looper's a great player. I just think that at the end of the day, when you're talking about what it is that White's going to need to win, it's going to be looking at, you know, what can Mata do to give the bot lane the advantages they need? What can Pawn do to win that mid lane? What can Dandy do to push every lane forward? I have yet to see a game where Looper hard carries from the top lane, and that was everything going right for White. And maybe I'm just not remembering something, and I would love, Thomas, you have that look on your face like, I have made a mistake, so please tell me where I'm going wrong.
Ouch! No, the only game that I can think of where Looper just went nuts, and I might be confusing with Acorn, quite honestly. It was right when Maokai got hyper buffed, and I believe it was Champion Summer when they played T1K, I think.
Fair.
And Looper
Maokai's
went like
amazing.
9-1 and 10 on Maokai because no one else had figured him out, and Looper had. I think that's the only game I can think of where Looper really blew the doors off an entire team. But anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry. Sidetrack.
No, I mean, and no, his Maokai is amazing, and that's just it. I don't say this to take away from what Looper is. He's a very, very good player. He's just on a team where they have other ways to win that are just probably the things that you would look for them first before you look at, is Looper going to carry this from the top lane? And maybe that's the wrong way to look at it. But he's a player that fills everything that they need, and I think that he should get his due credit. There you go.
Okay, we're going to move on to the last question now, focusing on some Western teams. Should teams like Alliance and Cloud9 try to play OGN Winter before Spring Split? This is a very interesting question.
Well, all I'm going to say on it is it'll never happen.
Wait,
Riot's
guys.
rule.
Give me a
I've
second.
been involved in some...
The stream stopped for a second. I need to...
Oh.
Okay.
Stream freeze. Freeze frame.
Okay.
Hopefully it stopped right when I started rambling towards the end of my Looper comments.
Alright,
That'd be great.
we're back.
Okay, so...
Go, Thomas.
The question, if I don't know where we've lost, but I'll just restate it. Should Alliance, Cloud9, basically, or NA or EU teams try and get into OGN Winter? The big thing I want to say on that is, barring a major policy change from Riot, it will never happen, because Riot is ultra protective of their LCS teams only playing in LCS tournaments. I've had some dealings with some folks trying to get like show matches going just to kind of pump up other regions. You know, hey, let's get #1 team in Turkey, Dark Passage. Even though they don't exist anymore. Let's get Dark Passage versus Alliance on a show match that we can show on stream. Riot doesn't like you doing stuff like that. So I don't think it would ever happen. But now if we're talking just totally hypothetical, it can't hurt. I mean, again, going back to the start of the show, my melting pot comment, the more styles you get to see, the more situations you put yourself in as a player and try and learn from, ideally the better you're going to be. There's a lot of stuff to be put in the psychological side of the game when you're confident about something. You look at teams, a player that doesn't know a top lane matchup that you should probably know. Well, that top lane player is probably not going to perform as well. When you remove that entire set of problems from your team, or at least minimize it to the point that occasionally you'll get surprised, but it certainly isn't a common occurrence, you get stronger. So from that perspective, just hypothetically, please let them try and qualify. Now, I will say they will not get out of groups, and if they won't. But if they can, again, it's about learning things and expanding your ability to play the game. Absolutely, please go to Korea, compete. If I was an LCS team, I would be competing in everything I can get my hands on, just to get better.
You don't think they can get out of groups? All you have to do is be top 8. You think Cloud9 can't be top 8 if they work really hard and prepped for Winter the way that they would want to? I mean, that's basically that's beating the stealths. Could they beat the stealths out of a group stage if they were put in the right situation?
Could you
I'm
represent
genuinely curious.
yourself?
Okay. Could they get out of groups maybe 25 to 30% of the time? I'll give them that. There have been some real stinkers in OGN Champions groups over the past year. But if you ran into something like the blue T1K group or the T1K Arrows group, no, they're not going to get through that. And that's why they wouldn't be the favorites, that's for sure.
You know, something I'd actually be interested in, there are rumors that there might be something called the Cuspa Cup, where teams from China, GPL, and Korea would all compete with each other, and that would be around OGN Winter, so before LCS. I'd like to, if that ever happened, I'd like to see TSM and C9 try and compete in that. That would be really interesting, because that's another international tournament, and that's off-season. I'd love to see that. I mean, I don't know who would go I don't know who would compete in the Cuspa tournament, but other than the Cuspa.
I've heard those rumors, and it's supposed to be China, Korea, but you know, one of the things that Riot Nick Allen has said a couple of times is that they want to look at more international tournaments, and I hope this is a hope. This is my hope. I don't have any insight on this. I hope that seeing how the World Championship has gone, going through multiple venues in multiple areas, and by and large, at least from a total outsider perspective, hasn't been that bad. I would be interested to speak to some media that were there and see how that side of it was handled. But as someone, it seems like it's gone fairly smoothly. I hope the positive experience that so far Riot has appeared to have does influence them in such a way that they'll want to have more international events like this, because it's been a lot of fun just as an analyst being like, does this thing from Southeast Asia match up against this North American thing? Does this European thing match? You know, that is my wheelhouse. So I hope this has a positive effect.
As long as it's not something like Battle of the Alliance, because that was just atrocious.
What if there was a Battle of the Pacific? This was an idea when I talked to Wolf, who's the GPL, one of the GPL English casters. He wants to do the same idea, but with the top teams from China, Korea, and maybe even the top two from the GPL, and have it be those teams instead. I would love that event. That event would be a lot of fun.
That question seemed to go on for a while. We're only meant to get a couple of opinions.
That's a third question already, different one.
So we're going to talk about is Frostgren's question of which is the second best region? Well, Frostgren, it's China, and I hope you're very happy about that. We all admit it. Stephen, who's the second best region?
I'd like
Don't
to.
look so confused.
Well, look, I would answer that. Okay. Based off the games we've seen, I'd say China. But I would have a better answer after we see the finals, because it's going to be Korea versus China, and I would compare the results of whatever Chinese team makes it to the finals against either Samsung Blue or White. I would compare those games to the NA, Samsung White vs TSM and Samsung Blue versus C9. I would try to compare at least those results before I even make a decision like that. But I guess if we're going off of we know currently, I'd say China.
Thomas, who's the second best region?
China, bar none.
Camille, who is the second best region?
China.
And Chase, who is the second best region?
It's China, as it's been when we've talked about this earlier. I'm happy to admit
It's
it.
China.
I just want to be sure we've been clear on this show and every episode I've been on that China was the second region. So I just want to be clear on this. This is not a new revelation to anyone on this panel. We have not been delusioned.
No, it's a new revelation to LOL Reddit and Twitter and those kind of things.
I think just Frostgren wants to hear it once a day. That's her goal. That's the only thing.
She needs her quota.
Yeah.
She does.
Happy we can help you out. China is the best region in the world. You can get my voice recording that, listen to it every day if you need to. Whatever to meet the quota, it's there.
China. We love them. We love that region. Okay, that's going to be the end of this episode. We'll probably be back next week at around the same time. If you want to catch us, we'll be doing it live. We'll have our live Q&A again. We'll probably have a switch up in panelists because we do that every week. But yeah, next time, tune in for episode 7. Big thanks to all of our guests for being on the show, for being great guests and coming up with brilliant answers.